going to back up just a little bit from the previous presentation, previous audio, and I'm going to go back to virtue as a mean. So if you're following along in the readings, Aristotle is talking about the mean. And not the absolute mean, but the mean relative to ourselves, right? So he says everybody has a mean, a middle point, a moderation point when we are looking for virtue, but that moderation point or that middle point is different for everyone. And so he goes on to say that by the mean considered relatively to ourselves, I understand that which is neither too much nor too little. But this is not one thing, nor is it the same for everybody. Thus, if 10 be too much and 2 too little, we take 6 as a mean in respect of the thing itself. For 6 is as much greater than 2 as it is less than 10. And this is a mean in arithmetical proportion. But the mean considered relative to ourselves must not be ascertained in this way. It does not follow that if 10 pounds of meat may be too much and 2 be too little for a man to eat, a trainer will order him 6 pounds, as this may itself be too much or too little for the person who is to take it. It will be too little, for example, for Milo, a big, strong man, but too much for a beginner in gymnastics, a tiny, little person. It will be the same with running and wrestling. The right amount will vary with the individual. This being so, everybody who understands his business avoids alike excess and deficiency, and he seeks and chooses the mean, not the absolute mean, but the mean considered relatively to ourselves. So, that's important, the mean considered relatively to ourselves. Every science then performs its function well if it regards the mean and refers the work which produces to the mean. This is the reason why it's usually said of successful works that it's impossible to take anything from them or to add anything to them, which implies that excess or deficiency is fatal to excellence, but the mean state ensures it. And so in our previous recording, I was talking about the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel that many people would believe is an excellent piece of work. There's nothing that can be added to it, or nothing that can be taken away from it to make it any more excellent. If you add something to it, then that's excess, and it sort of ruins it. If you take something away, it's deficient. So Aristotle said excellence in and of itself is the mean, right? Or the mean is in and of itself excellent. But virtue, like nature herself, is more accurate and better than any art. Virtue, therefore, will aim at the mean. I speak of moral virtue as it is moral virtue which is concerned with emotions and actions, and it is these which admit of excess and deficiency in the mean. Thus, it is possible to go too far or not go far enough in respect of fear, courage, desire, anger, pity, and pleasure and pain generally, and the excess and the deficiency are alike wrong. Now, this is important, because this is what Aristotle is talking about. It's to experience these emotions at the right times and on the right occasions and toward the right persons and for the right causes and in the right manner. That's the mean or the supreme good, and that's the characteristic of virtue. He's not saying you can never get angry. He's not saying you can never have pity. And he's never saying that you can never have fear. But he's saying that you have to experience those things at the right time, in the right ways, on the right occasions, with the right people, and then that is the characteristic of virtue. Similarly, there may be excess and deficiency or the mean in regard to actions, but virtue is concerned with emotions and actions. And here, excess is an error and deficiency a fault, whereas the mean is successful and laudable, and success and merit are both characteristics of virtue. So star this sentence. It appears then that virtue is a mean state, so far at least as it aims at the mean. Again, there are many different ways of going wrong, for evil is in its nature infinite, to use the Pythagorean figure, but good is finite. But there is only one possible way of going right. So if you think about that continuum again, and you think about the mean being in the middle, virtue being in the middle, with excess and deficiency on either end, there's lots of ways to not hit that middle mark. Right? There's infinite ways of going wrong. There's only one way of going right. Accordingly, the former is easy and the latter difficult. It is easy to miss the mark, but difficult to hit it. This, again, is the reason why excess and deficiency are characteristics of vice, and the mean state a characteristic of virtue. For good is simple, evil manifold. Okay, so put brackets around this next paragraph. Virtue, then, is a state of deliberate moral purpose consisting in a mean that is relative to ourselves, the mean being determined by reason, or as a prudent man would determine it. That's important because he's not saying that you become virtuous by coincidence, that it's just something that happens to you. But virtue and acting virtuously is deliberate. It's purposeful, right? And that's really important. It is a mean state, firstly, as lying between two vices, the vice of excess on the one hand and the vice of deficiency on the other. And secondly, because whereas the vices either fall short of or go beyond what is proper in the emotions and actions, virtue not only discovers but embraces that mean. Accordingly, virtue, if regarded in its essence or theoretical conception, is a mean state, but if regarded from the point of view of the highest good or of excellence, it's an extreme in and of itself. But it is not every action or every emotion that admits of a mean state. There are some whose very name implies wickedness. So there are some that Aristotle says, hey, you're not going to find the middle point in this. These things are just wrong. For example, malice, shamelessness, envy, adultery, theft, murder, among actions. All these and others like them are censured as being intrinsically wicked. Not merely the excess or deficiency of them. It's never possible then to be right in respect of them. They're always sinful. So right or wrong in such actions as adultery does not depend on our committing them with the right person at the right time or in the right manner. On the contrary, it's sinful to do anything of the kind at all. It would be equally wrong then to suppose that there can be a mean state or an excess or deficiency in unjust, cowardly, or licentious conduct. For if it were so, there would be a mean state of an excess or of a deficiency, and an excess of an excess and a deficiency of a deficiency. But as in temperance and courage, there can be no excess or deficiency because the mean is, in a sense, an extreme. So too in these cases there cannot be a mean or an excess or deficiency, but however the acts may be done, they are wrong. For it is a general rule that an excess or deficiency does not admit of a mean state, nor a mean state of an excess or deficiency. And so Aristotle then goes on a little bit later to sort of give some examples of virtues. And Aristotle has lots of examples, but in the reading he talks about courage, he talks about temperance, right? He talks about licentiousness and generosity and stinginess. So he goes on to give you some examples. But then near the end of the reading, he does tell you why it's so difficult to be virtuous. He says that the reason why it's so hard to be virtuous is that it's always hard work to find the mean in anything. It's not everybody, but only a man of science who can find the mean or center of a circle. So too, anybody can get angry. That's easy. And anybody can give or spend money. That's easy. But to give it to the right persons, to give the right amount of it, and to give it at the right time and for the right cause and in the right way, that's not what anybody can do, nor is it easy. That's the reason why it's rare and laudable and noble to do well, right? To find that mean, right? Accordingly, one who aims at the mean must begin by departing from that extreme, which is the more contrary to the mean. Okay? So Aristotle knows it's hard. He knows we're not going to hit the mean every single time. But he says what we can do is we can aim for the mean, right? And we can do that by staying as far away from excess and deficiency, as far away from those extremes as we possibly can. Okay? So he says, we must drag ourselves in the direction opposite to them, for it is by removing ourselves as far as possible from what is wrong that we shall arrive at the mean, as we do when we pull a crooked stick straight. Okay? So that's encouraging, is that Aristotle knows that you don't have to hit the mean every time right on the mark, and that you aren't going to hit it every time on the mark. But if you are trying to aim at the mean, right, your motivation is to aim at the mean, and you try to do that by taking yourself as far away from excess and deficiency as you possibly can, you're on the right track to leading the best and most worthwhile life. So I hope you've got a better understanding of this part of Aristotle's Nicomachean ethics, and that I was able to provide you a little more insight into Aristotle.